This is a stack of cards. I don't think anyone would object to that fact, really. Say I take one card off the top and remove it from consideration. This is still a stack, correct? We could agree that the removal of one card from a stack would never make it into a non-stack, which is reasonable as one single card changing the entire definition renders it, well, quite flimsy. We have two essentially non-debatable truths, but from them we come to a paradoxical conclusion. If we keep applying the second one in turn, removing one card at a time, which can never make a stack into a non-stack, eventually we have one card remaining as the entire stack. Obvious truth leads into an undeniable falsehood. This is a Sorites Paradox, named for its original formulation of grains of sand in a stack, but cards are a bit neater, so forgive the change. It's an issue not just of nouns, but of verbs, adjectives, all language really. At what speed does walking become running? Or when does tall start to be applied? Where does blue shift into a different color? There is no obvious point where everyone would agree on these changes. All of these things are vague. So, how do we actually define the world around us? Some of you may already be jumping to the conclusion, but stick with me for a bit here. There have been a few proposed solutions to the paradox. The most obvious is that a boundary does exist, i.e. a heap is a certain minimum and maximum number of grains, we just aren't aware of the boundary. Take Plato's theory of forms, an idea under idealism which would state that there is a stack which exists in theory and is only mimicked in reality. Somewhere beyond the constraints of time and space, it causes reality, represented unideally by physical objects and limited minds. It could have a specific number which constitutes it, we just aren't aware of it and apply the term haphazardly. We could also just declare a specific number and reach the same result, so with our ration we can declare an essential ideal form. So, if we count out a supposed heap, we can determine whether it is or isn't one. However, this doesn't define heap in a useful way because it requires us to analyze the heap in order to define it, a circular sort of logic where, well, knowledge isn't really possible because it requires being non-accidentally right. Since we can't by sensation know the number of grains, even if the boundary exists, we are still first making a guess when we say that is a heap, as we wait for it to be counted. The possibility of being right or wrong requires analysis and thus excludes true knowledge. Plus, it leaves us with the switch flip issue. Does the term have any value if such a minor change applies or revokes it? So, simply stating a boundary really isn't that satisfactory. Now, what if we add multiple, somewhat overlapping boundaries instead of just one of them? This is known as supervaluation, which introduces a truth value gap, a state which is neither true nor false. Multiple boundaries exist, such as 800,000, 900,000, 1 million, and the application of heap can be judged as true or false on all of these. If it holds true for all of them, it is true, and if it holds true for none of them, then it is false. If it holds true for some and not others, well, it's neither. This seems to do better. There is no longer a paradoxical switch from false to true, so the problem is solved, right? However, it raises another issue. Which boundaries are correct? We still have to determine what the cutoff is for the cutoffs, so to speak, as in, is it valid to say 100,000 grains of sand is still a heap? And as we emit more and more cutoffs, the range of the volume gap increases so that something may have 90% of its range resting in an indeterminate space where we can still ask, is it a heap? And receive little more than a shrug. But too few boundaries and, well, that's just the initial problem again. Supervaluation more or less kicks the can down the road, bringing us a more realistic solution, but nowhere near perfect. So a step further is found in fuzzy logic, which places infinitely many truth values between 0 and 1. Instead of cutoffs, which delineate true and false, we apply values to each. For example, if 1 million grains of sand is a heap, then 950,000 grains could be true with a value of 0.95, which is almost certainly true. Or only 100,000 grains could have a 0.1 truth value, which is almost certainly false. As each grain is removed, so of the truth of the statement is also removed. In the middle, when it's somewhere near 0.5, we could say it is somewhat a heap, which is pretty accurate to how we define things. It's not blue and it's not green, it's blue-green. Now, that still has some vagueness to it, but we could apply the process again. What is the truth value of the statement of truth value? We might only be able to say that the heap is somewhat so, but we could say we are totally certain of this somewhat, leading to a truth value of 0.51. Absolute certainty in our half certainty. Maybe it's even more questionable, and we're only somewhat certain in the somewhat heap, but apply the process again. We are totally certain of being somewhat certain of the somewhat heap, 0.5.51. Of course, this could go on forever. We did it this way to prove a point. Isn't it kind of ridiculous? Yes, fuzzy logic maps better onto reality, but at a certain point, you're essentially still counting out the heap to be able to say how certain you are. How else could you validate such granularity? Even if we have the ration to make these statements, we lack the sensation to be able to verify them in many cases. And that's the real conclusion we referenced earlier. Our definitions are vague because we don't perceive reality, at least not all of it. If we could look at a collection of sand and say that's 782,183 grains, then we would just do that because it keeps the vagueness away. It describes reality exactly. Heap is flawed because there are no heaps in nature. There are quantities of sand. Walking and running are just speeds of motion, and there is no blue. There is a wavelength our eyes interpret as blue with many, many slight variations. But our eyes are not good enough to look at a heap and know how many grains are in it, and our time and energy are too finite to be able to count each one we come across. That's exactly why we devised ordinary things. For our limited perception, heap is much more useful than 782,272 grains of sand. While the former describes nothing real, for us it approximates something real more efficiently than the number itself. Instead of using all of the numbers, we use a few terms, a few delineations on the scale, which correspond to the level of difference we can perceive. But the number or location of delineations is a tightrope act because it must be vague enough to be efficient, but precise enough to still represent reality usefully. If heap refers to both 1 million grains of sand and just 100 grains of sand, well, it does no good. Now, after all of that, you might be rightly thinking, what does it matter? We're just quibbling over terms that we made. Whether or not heap exists doesn't change anything about your life. But the best way I've heard this paradox described is the tension between small changes and big consequences, because our decisions are just as limited as our perception. How can we judge accurately that what we can't perceive accurately? Consider the law. We can't agree on which actions are crimes, can we? The law is purposefully vague for this reason, to allow for situational consideration, for argument, because we weren't there to observe every single fact and make the entirely right call. But even though the term it applies, criminal, is vague, the consequences are not. Consider how much someone's life can change forever with the application of just one label. Jail time, criminal record, public perception, conditions inside the prison, and so much more. Whether or not someone can argue the term's application well, quite literally dictates the rest of their life, maybe. We apply so much consequence to things we made up, treating boundaries that logically cannot exist as if they're inherent to the universe. The Sorites Paradox is important because it makes clear how nonsense all of our words are in a world where words can determine life or death. Most notably, and most covered in narrative, is human. Where does human with all its rights and assumptions begin and end? We can't answer that here today, we're too complex to ever do so. But we can look at how impactful having or lacking the term is, nonetheless, with 3 stories: Jin-Roh, Shadow's House, and From the New World. So, spoilers ahead for all 3. Jin-Roh is a tragic tale about how easily the definition of human can be stolen away from us by the paradox's logic. We can't perceive the change if it's bit by bit, the classic boiled frog, here serving as a way to turn possible dissent into total obedience. The story opens on a conflict between the sect, a revolutionary group, and various wings of the police and military, most notably the Capitol Police. Here we see regular people armed with little more than bricks they're literally pulling up from the streets, standing up to riot gear and tanks, taking blows from batons on bare skin as they lash against literal armor. Why do they take such an obviously terrible ordeal? We find the same kind of question, and as such our answer, in Camus' The Rebel. A slave who has taken orders his whole life suddenly decides he cannot obey some new command. What does he mean by saying no? The act of rebellion for Camus was the affirmation of a borderline, some point which, once crossed, makes a human associate themselves with the entire species. By saying no, the rebel implies a yes in the other direction, that the oppression is infringing upon something crucial, even though, as is made obvious from their previous position of despair, the oppressed has almost nothing to defend. Thus, they must be defending something they can't help but have. The point at which they say no is when they cease to be concerned with individual value, their internal protest which wasn't spoken in order to avoid pain, because such a thing is worth only one human, and start to be concerned with universal value, because such a thing is worth all humans. They can only place themselves in danger, stand up to such a difference in power, by having something equally strong to defend, that being humanity itself. Their fight is for humankind, and so singular pain means little in comparison. It's important that this is not a creation, but a discovery. They don't make themselves equal to humanity, they simply are, which makes the process retroactive. Upon the realization, they see not just the present wrongs, but the past wrongs and all possible future wrongs are, were, and will be an infringement upon a definitive human quality. The reason to rebel becomes even stronger. A fight in service of time itself renders such singular pain entirely meaningless. The rebellion, while it seems individualistic, actually rejects the individual and associates them with the collective instead, for only there does it find the logic to stand up to oppression, to defend one who seems to have nothing. Rebellion, though apparently negative since it creates nothing, is profoundly positive in that it reveals the part of man which must always be defended. This is why we witness rebellion in Jin-Roh. That fundamental humanity was obviously stolen from them, seen in street executions, in the family and friends no longer alive, in the time they serve in cells. It's the growing divide between rich and poor, where men in suits waste money no more than 20 feet from deadly poverty, where high-rises are built in surrounding ruined homes. Each of these actions negates the chance to experience crucial aspects of humanity, love, choice, or expression. Just look at the dead-eyed stare of the bomb carrier the intro centers on, maintained at all times. Those mechanical actions don't belong to a troubled teen, they belong to someone with no humanity left to express. Sure, she still shows fear when the special unit, an almost literal death squad, guns down her comrades, but that's how much it takes for her to feel. She can only emote in the face of death. When we consider this, the choice to pull the cord on her bomb, as she does when eventually surrounded, is obvious. Her life as a human is over either way, so the most human thing she can do is choose the future, an imaginary time where, hopefully, people like her never have to make such a choice. The future is more human than she is allowed, so she must fight for it instead. The point is, this is what happens when power clearly takes away human qualities that we feel inherent and required. The people will be made aware of the value Keimu spoke of and change their actions as such. This serves as a contrast to Fusei, a soldier whose humanity is stolen away in a much slower, more deliberate fashion. He's a member of that special unit, the one who fails to shoot the bomb carrier before she can pull the cord. As such, he's sent back to training, the thing that robbed him, where human instinct is replaced, slow and steady, to leave the term but without the proof. If you find any of this sounding familiar, it's because work functions the same way. Consider time. Naturally, a human could wake up whenever. We're not nocturnal or anything, but we do have different internal clocks, meaning some naturally wake up earlier or later, and we do this variably depending on how much energy we expend that day as well. Work real hard, sleep a little bit more. It also just makes sense for a species trying to defend itself to have some awake at all times. As such, a schedule is not human, which is why Fusei is on one. He wakes up at the same time no matter the conditions, and even more, earlier than anyone would choose to, meaning he has to rest earlier than others as well, leaving him with less choice and, quite literally, less time awake with other people. And consider memory. Naturally, a human actually has quite a hazy memory, unable to recall specific facts, but broad strokes, because we don't actually record, we recreate. This is what another Oshi work, Ghost in the Shell, is all about. Our memories are malleable because they're for identity, not fact. But Fusei doesn't have it the same. When asked to recount the night of the bombing, he goes through everything in almost exact detail, spoken without a hint of emotion, just like a recording, despite the content of it. He's not doing what a human does, passively taking in his surroundings, but he's doing what a soldier does, noting them at all times. Just look at him on the train, analyzing the situation and huddled up as if he'll be attacked because of all the factors. A concrete memory is not human, which is why Fusei has one. Consider the most obvious detail, the mask, quite literally taking away his recognizable humanity. There's even more I had outlined, but I think you get the point. The training he undergoes is quite literally about replacing his human instincts with soldier habits, slowly reducing and removing everything which makes him human to begin with. This is important because of how it gives two similar people entirely different perspectives. Discussing his failure on that night, one of Fusei's rare friends offers him the location of the girl's grave. Upon visiting, he finds her sister, Kei, who appears to be unaligned with either side, and the two start to spend time together and inevitably fall in love. But it's a setup. His friend was setting it up because she is a former revolutionary herself, offered freedom if she lures him into a trap which makes the special unit appear corrupt so that it can be torn down. But that is a setup too, because Fusei is a member of Jin-Roh, the counterintelligence group within the special unit, aware of the ploy in turning it back on their enemies. If they can capture this girl instead, proof of underhanded dealings, then they become invulnerable to any further political attacks. Most of the time they're together, Fusei is aware of who Kei really is. But to counter the last but, that's exactly why they fall in love. Fusei is actually quite similar to the revolutionaries. In fact, the dead-eyed stare and monotone is just about the exact same between them. Whenever she lies on the floor and stares at nothing, it looks like he always does. He's isolated, disinterested, has very little to his name and no source of enjoyment. He is pulling bricks from the street just like them, and it shows. He falls for Kei because in being so similar to him, she cuts through to those deepest layers. When she sees a torn down, forgotten building and he does too, they feel the same thing. When they're on the roof, wondering where to go, she can finish his sentence about escaping the city, starting somewhere new because he gets the reasons for why, just like her. When you live the same life as someone else, you don't need to try to understand and love them. It just happens in line with who you are. Their love is proof of how similar he is to his foes. That's why the training is so important. They are the same, but they do not take the same actions. The revolutionaries, in feeling the term human failing to apply, revolt. But Fusei, still believing it does, serves instead. By replacing those instincts slowly, one by one, habit by habit, they make a man who takes the actions of a beast, but who will never consider himself one because enough grains are never swept away at once. The revolutionary becomes a soldier instead. This explains his odd sentiment in his nightmares. Starting with the former, he says about that night,
I meant to shoot her. I actually meant to shoot her.
Because this creates a conflict. The part of him that's been trained and the irreplaceable humanity, screaming at him not to shoot, yelling that he and she share a duty to exist. That part can never be removed, which is why they need the term to still apply. He can never understand why he didn't shoot her so long as he thinks of himself as human. He can question, but with the wrong information, he cannot answer. Similarly is the latter. Painful dreams where he sees himself among the wolves chasing after Kay, eventually letting them through the gate where she was once safe to claw chest and tear throat. He yells in those dreams, screams because deep down he doesn't want to be a beast. He is a man capable of love and all else still, right? Doesn't their time together prove such a thing? But as she replies in the dream,
You can't come with me.
Because he's too far gone. In reversing the ploy to take down the special unit, he's letting the beasts have a feast. It's so obvious, he should be able to interpret this. It's not really that deep, but once again, with the wrong information, he cannot see it. Stuck in questioning, his only available action is to move forward down the single path he can see. This is why he starts, but doesn't finish, his statement that he and Kay could just run away from it all. Having just saved her from the climax of the plot against the special unit, where they intended to catch him in a bomb drop-off, they return to the rooftop amusements from one of their dates and share part of the night, where he makes said statement. Despite her excitement, he denies the choice to instead return and follow his orders, heading to the rendezvous with Jin-Roh. There, shocked by his true role, she breaks down and cries, wishing they could have just run, wishing they could have at least died together because then she could have known she was important. A heartbreakingly human plea. And he rejects it silently, dons his mask and massacres his own people, his once friend, even in brutal fashion. Despite all the reasons in the world for them to feel the same, she cries in horror while he makes her. That is the difference the slow robbery makes. One who finds himself inhuman by force builds humanity, but one who falsely believes himself human by force destroys it. But as we know, there is an eventual realization, a point where the theft becomes clear and the premise is known. There are no grains left. Having taken Kay to Jin-Roh and secured the special unit's safety, there is one thing left to do. Make sure Kay can never be killed or taken back by the other side. And of course, there's only one way to guarantee that, and that's to do it yourself. What's better for them is the idea that they have her, while she's actually dead and buried, and that is the only total security they can have. Fusei objects, as he's clearly fallen in love with her, but as they make clear, love is a human thing, and he is a beast. His leader gives him the gun and walks away, and a soldier like Fusei is left with the knowledge that he either kills her or a sniper kills them both. There is no option because he is a liability to and having loved her. He can't live unless they know he won't act on those feelings. And a beast never will. To be forced to kill her is to prove this point, to make him recognize that his humanity was stolen, to curse every moment where he still had a choice, where they could have ran, and then to give up all that remains by his own will. If he has anything human left, he'll be shot by a sniper and die. But if he doesn't, he'll live, and live with the horrible thing he's done and as such never want to be human and think a day in his life again. To reject choice, to reject humanity, is the only escape from the pain of what he's done, and he pulls the trigger and the sniper pulls back. The last grain of sand is flicked away by his own hand. But for all the power of having human where it doesn't apply, we find just as much control in simply removing it, but keeping the motions the same. Shadow's house provides a fitting example. It follows two groups, the shadows and their living dolls. The former have all the privilege, soot-emitting beings with unique powers but no face, and so they require humans to clean their never-ending mess and act as their expression. Overall, the latter play out with absolute joy, often singing praises of the shadows and the work they bestow. It's odd. They suffer an exaggeration of the toils we all hate, our required chores, but they're actually happier because of it. How has that come to be? Well, as a caveat, part of this is unfortunately brainwashing. The living dolls are fed a coffee which, through the anime magic of the leader Soot, makes them totally loyal to the shadows. However, they still exhibit such a loyalty before they're introduced to the coffee, plus they can break the spell by willpower and friendship and have some of that loyalty still remain, so the brainwashing is more or less an exaggeration of what's already there and kind of the least interesting part of the show. So I'm fine setting it aside here today to examine the much more interesting factors around it. The start of those factors is simple. They don't see themselves as human. They know what humans are, but they believe they are mere replicas, crafted by the head of Shadow's house to mimic humans in intricate detail, and everyone says that guy is powerful and great. So with a convenient excuse for why they may feel human but aren't, do they have any reason to hate what we hate? We hate forced work because it revokes part of our humanity, but whenever the living dolls work a day away and eat clearly worse food than the shadows, it affirms their dollhood. And after all, a doll, something even a child knows and understands, in contrast to something as complex as human, is only given quality by that which holds it, right? It's a tool, one which functions best when it simply looks like that which it is not. Their tasks feel correct to the term. Living dolls shouldn't fret over trivial matters, just feels natural to them in the same way that humans have free will might feel natural to us. As such, to be human is actually to fail at what they believe themselves to be, making those inescapable deep feelings not a point of pride, but something to be hidden with shame. Consider their clearly worse food. Why would one make doll food good when the point of a doll is simply to express the master? Since the meaning originates there, they only need the appearance, not the real taste. This is why Emilico, the face for Kate, can only be convinced to eat better bread by being told it so Kate can see her own expression. By command is the only way to not invoke a sense of shame. What they feel deep down that humans can't help is directly countered by what they're taught they are. Without the right term, how does one understand and organize those feelings after all? We classify, even when false, because it's how we begin to know. Thus, doll usurps human. It's also a matter of resistance. We don't like every part of being human, do we? There's times we curse the fact that we have rationed to think so deeply and choose so freely, lost in the options required of humans. To be overwhelmed by all of it and shut off for a moment, stop considering so much itself is a human thing. In a way, the definition of a living doll extends this one part of being human. If it has this basis and counters those anxieties, wouldn't we accept it easier? This is why the definition of a living doll is often about not doing something humans can find pain in, or which takes much effort to do, like deep consideration. As they always say,
"You're a living doll. You don't have to fret over trivial matters."
Being one is just mentally easier, giving a reason not to think and pleasure not to think, which then prevents them from developing the skills of thought, so it all self-reinforces. The value to live up to being a doll is to stop trying to be human, to maintain a state of no conscious effort. Don't think, just clean. Don't speak, just look. It makes the easy path into the correct path and helps solidify those roles. But the main thrust of how they're controlled so joyously works in a specific way, where they're taking human actions without getting human results. Consider Emilico's Don't Fret notebook. She's very curious, always trying to see new things and meet new people, which of course includes fretting over trivial matters like the lives of her friends. A human literally cannot help but be curious. No words will change that. But as it's said to be a personal failing here, What she has to do is find a way to express that desire without feeling it, without impact. So just take a notebook, write it down, close it, and forget it, because it is the action of gathering everything to consider, the physical process of importance, but without ever actually considering it. But now it's out of her head, it's expressed without leading anywhere. The motions of humanity without human results. This is why the shadow's control works, because even if we're just making something else's expression, we are still expressing. The relationship they have with the shadows is designed not to remove, but to appeal to human desires like that, just direct them somewhere else. This is why Kate says to Emilico, "You're Kate's cherished identity," because establishing that they still have a unique identity, even if not theirs, keeps them satisfied. We know it's unique because of how they need each other. No shadow is allowed to exist, or even can, without their face. There is no substitute. They either pass the debut and are welcomed into society, or they are discarded. I mean, this can be seen from appearance alone, as they all clearly match 1-to-1. So the dolls aren't just worker drones, cleaning up in some replaceable by any other way. Rather, they are accomplishing a task only they can do, sustaining a whole living being that no one else could. They, despite having no identity of their own, are still unique, still expressing something very literally. Because everything which is said about their shadow is said about them in some way, is it not? Every laugh, every taste, every look is also the dolls, tying them together. How would anyone even see the shadow if not for the doll, after all? This is why they joyously serve. Name and identity, none of that matters when compared to the reason those things exist. Purpose. The dolls don't have a human life, but they have the goal of a human life. How could they be anything but satisfied? In short, the humanity of the actions is being transferred to the shadows. This is exactly the point, because the living dolls are not copies made of the shadows, but the shadows are copies of the humans, mimics who form themselves after stolen children. They have thoughts and feelings and desires and much of what we do, but the one thing they can never have as a collection of soot is a face, an identity, a point to everything else they have. It's everything which drives one to need all of that, but with no way to do so. So, in a way, the shadows are trying to escape their own torture, to finally have the means to complete themselves. So they model themselves after the humans to gain this, developing a personality and reflection of them, learning how to behave from them as Kate learns to smile and be seen from Emilico. They allow the humans to be natural enough to be educators, to pass on their qualities and do what the shadows can't, so that one day it can be theirs. The end purpose isn't just to have someone who acts as a face, but to have a shadow which has learned to be human, and a human which has learned to be empty. The humans, in giving up the results of their crucial qualities to the shadows, become accustomed to being nothing more than actions, a body to be moved, and are eventually overtaken physically by the shadow in full. This is what moves one from the children's wing to the adult house, the combination of shadow and face, able to reveal the human form underneath at will. The point was to have the vessel empty itself out, take all that was in it for oneself, and then take it too. Shadow's house serves as the opposing case to Jin-Roh. Instead of having their humanity revoked while the term stayed, they have had their humanity permitted and the term changed. The result is a different flavor of the same thing, a choice between happy or depressed servitude. But we also must be careful with how we shift the definition, because when so much relies on what is human or not, even a slight change can build or break entire lives. From the New World tells this tale. The series opens on a picture of our own world, where something known as power, the psychic ability to manipulate matter, is first coming to be. Well, in the future, we see it used for mundane tasks, stacking cards or fixing vases, or even some interesting ones like painting from dust. It was originally much more violent. The first of those to unlock it went on rampages, tearing through entire city blocks without lifting a finger. power users, who were only 0.3% of the population, became unstoppable weapons, leading to world war and a reduction of said total population to just 2% of what it once was. The world split into 4 groups, eventually being reunited under the control of those with power who sustained a minor amount of technology. These rulers eventually became the dominant group we see from the New World, where 100% of humans are power users existing in a pre-industrial society which seems to be focused only on raising the children, like Saki, Shun, Satoru, and the rest comprising our main cast. But if power users were like walking nuclear arsenals, how did things become so peaceful like we see? How are these kids spending days playing nonsense games in class without a care in the world? Humans are naturally quite weak. Compared to every other species, our real physical niche is endurance. I mean, we take an extremely long time to mature and alone are extraordinarily vulnerable. But those lackings are what allowed and kind of forced us to devote more energy to thought, to communication, to tools, society, because we couldn't win by strength alone. We won by cooperation instead. That's what's led to, well, everything we currently know. To be human requires togetherness. That is one of the closest things we could get to a definition. But if you give everyone power, then what need do they have for each other? A single person can build or raise an entire society with nothing more than their mind. Cooperation became obsolete, and humans began to move beyond the line we knew. This is only natural. All things grow and change. No solid term would describe anything forever. Homo heidelbergensis and Homo habilis became Homo sapien after all. But everything we know and love, and just as crucially, the authority of everyone making such decisions, is built on the result of those human qualities, on togetherness, the now antiquated term. As such, to preserve human experience as it was known, they changed the content of human itself. Genetic manipulation implanted humans with the instincts of bonobos and wolves, the former giving us a free love reaction to resolve stress and conflict, and the latter an extreme aversion to hunting one's own kind. This was also paired with a heavy dose of suggestion and hypnosis, and not just telling people what to do and think, but conditioning them for it since birth. There's such a deep-seated taboo on hurting other humans that when our main cast hears of it occurring in the past, it shocks them to their core. And they didn't believe it was possible for one human to hurt another after years and years of reciting stories where it was told to be impossible, and a history which had said the same. This makes the suggestion just about the same as the genetic alteration, as it dictates what one feels to be naturally human or not. After all, as their ceremonies to draw out power demand, let us burn away the last of your worldly desires. That puts it best. To have power, you must not have desire. Quite clearly, humans are not human anymore. So much was ripped out of the definition that to keep it is laughable. But that's the point. It isn't about the accuracy of the word, it is about the justifications reliant on it. If they accepted that people evolved beyond human, what comes next? Do some get more rights and others less? Do we throw out the entire thing and start again? They could only continue to justify the lives they knew and spent so long building based on what humans were, not what they'd become. And so, for that continuation of all we knew, they changed the people to fit the term. Yes, they have the instincts of other animals, and no desire and no individualism, but they do need each other, and that's what was wanted the most. Like many definitions, it works backwards from the result. But we left out the most notable change still, the death of shame. This is a genetically engineered reaction in those with power to even just the thought of harming another human, which leads to physical inhibition by limiting organ functionality, and if one does manage to break past it, total organ failure leading to almost immediate death. All that instinctual manipulation and suggestion alone did not do it, so they had to revoke even more. But most notable about that is an obvious flaw. This was all done to keep power users from being absolute destruction, but now what defense do they have against anyone without or able to bypass the death of shame? A single unaltered human could kill as many altered humans as they wished, because none of them could attack in response. And what reason would the regular humans have to not do so? Just as, in the future, those with power see themselves as lords over all the other mammals, saying they shouldn't even bother to save one of the monster rats, even though they could with mind alone, doesn't this give their predecessors reason to see themselves as lords too? I mean, if something can't even make the choice to fight back against you and save its life, is it really human anymore? You are, and you feel a reason to, so if it can't, then you could find a reason to call it something different, that is, to exclude it from all the assumptions and consequences of sharing your label. With so much variance, because of how much was ripped out, the term lost cohesion and thus the point they sought. So those with power had to go even further. It wasn't just that all those modifications helped keep togetherness, it's actually that lacking what they prevented must be crucial to being human. A real human shouldn't be able to choose to attack others. What barbarism would that be? We're much too advanced for that. After all, look at our power. So, anyone who could do so could not be trusted in human society. It's a simple thing. Context. If you suddenly say that most of the heap isn't made of true sand, but something that actually doesn't count and then swipe it away, well, now every grain which remains counts an immense amount more. A single handful could be made into a mountain comparatively. As in, if you say nothing that was once human is anymore, only power and its alterations are, then it's as if anyone without power has suddenly ceased to be human at all. This is how they justify, in the current day we witness, removing all those whose power never manifests from society, as not every child is guaranteed to do so. As we see with our main cast, one of them is removed from it and all of their memories altered so that they would never even know, because that child could not manifest power. It's simple. If no other traits matters to being human but that, if human friends, even human family doesn't make one the same, then there's no guilt in killing an important part of yourself when you kill someone without it. By tampering so delicately with this definition, which precludes all rights, they keep a carefully curated society of only the most controlled, where the very thing they decided was required can never go off like a bomb and kill them all. The result is still maintained. But this introduces an issue at the other end. If everyone is so focused on power, could they actually make someone with too much of it? The answer is yes, which we see with Shun. Despite being the most promising of his class, named in future considerations for the leader of their town even, he becomes what they call a karmic demon, someone who cannot control the unconscious spill of their power. It is a dangerous state. For others we hear about, and him, it leads to the death of entire families, entire towns even, because even as he focuses all his power on objects like these spheres, he has so much that it still morphs matter around him without his will. This is the humans being trapped by their own definition, because isn't this just being too human as they've defined? All the day's training in school, all the rituals about giving up everything but power, the idolization of those who have it most, all Shun did was become exactly what they wanted, just too well. Power has become so crucial in everyone's minds now that it's actually possible to develop it to a dangerous degree, where the mind knows nothing but it and overflows. Would this still happen if they didn't make it the fundamental requirement and as such necessary to exist, stressful to feel as fading or lacking? If the children were allowed to just exist as humans were meant to spread out their interests, develop their own communities, could any one part of them be so dangerously consuming? I don't think so, because they could never be in such an all-or-nothing route. Look at how Shun painfully stares at his task in class, how no ounce of focus can drift anywhere else until this egg is hatched, no matter how long it takes. This is akin to forced obsession. Their standards made him into this. This is exactly why they always end up destroying so much before they're dealt with. They literally can't be. They're too human, and so the death of shame would still recognize them, and no one with power is able to do so. So they make up a new term, not too human, but karmic demon, and they have the children recite the stories of them over and over, always ending with, karmic demon shouldn't be allowed to exist, because once again, change the label and you change the assumptions and rights. They have to convince them to end their own lives instead, leaving them with medicine to fix their condition, which they know is just poison but take anyway. After all, karmic demons shouldn't be allowed to exist. To feel oneself falling out of the human definition, to lose everything that comes with it, is enough despair to end it, a carefully crafted solution of rhetoric. But tellingly, there is someone who refused to see this. Subaru, Shun's dog. No matter how much he told it to stay away, it always came back to his side, even at the cost of horrific mutation. The reason is simple. Subaru doesn't have language. He can't witness all of reality the same as us, but he doesn't have a reason to think he can. He doesn't have simple, neat packages to inspire confidence. He just has feeling. And Shun felt the same, just Shun as he always was. His smell, his feel, his love, all those kinds of things the humans said no longer mattered. One change isn't enough for this being to exclude his best friend from those tender emotions. Subaru makes clear how unnatural the terms are, that what's used to dictate this boy take his own life, or even more, what's used to dictate this entire society, the removal of thousands of humans from it, is nothing more than a vague term from subjective minds, always changing. This is why nothing we've covered so far was actually enough to make power the ruling trait. Because for how much we like to play with words, they aren't reality, and deep down we know that. Even when we say someone isn't human, all we need to do is look at them to see an almost infinite number of relations. This is even seen directly in how the humans themselves have abused the death of shame, where objects are able to emit a seemingly human form upon destruction. Because while the one who committed the act knows they didn't harm a real human, their eyes still saw a human being harmed in connection to their actions. Their ration fails to counter their sensation, and they don't die, but they do enter a much weakened state because of this, often having to recite, I didn't kill them, or a similar sentence to be able to recover. Just the sight of a human being harmed, whatever the label or context, is more powerful than any of their words. So to become the dominant kind of human, they couldn't just coin the others as others, they had to make them not feel and look so human. And so they changed them. The monster rats, the ones they've been using for forced labor, the ones they've been killing with reckless abandon, blowing the heads off or burning them alive. As Satoru discovers from forbidden research, they have 23 pairs of chromosomes, matching only the olive tree and human beings. And you can't make a monster rat from an olive tree. The humans without power were morphed into these forms, one which we're told are a source of constant pain due to the odd proportions and bends. Simply existing for them as a struggle, and to make it this way was a conscious choice. And this was abundantly clear in all they witnessed. It should have been obvious. They have names which they take pride in and identify with. They have colonies which they define themselves around, warring with the other ones, even taking slaves when they do. They lie and cheat to achieve their own desires. They overthrow their feudal systems to implement elected officials instead. And maybe, most tellingly, they refuse to accept defeat where the new humans give it up at the slightest hint of difficulty. Despite their subjugation, their constant pain, they never stop moving forward, advancing from simple tunnels to full-blown cities with manufacturing in the span of a single lifetime. Without having everything else stripped away to be defined by a single trait, the monster rats are leaving the humans in the dust because they can fight over what's important, sacrifice for it, and as such chase it with all of their hearts. Yes, this comes with many flaws, with conflict, but progress is always born from that first and foremost. It is a foundational aspect of humanity, why we have distinct selves to begin with probably. A creature with endless personal desire for the future will make it happen. It should have been obvious. But the humans aren't human enough to recognize human. They still look like us though, so that's what's considered us. The death of shame doesn't trigger when they kill monster rats because that's how shallow their definition is. In reality, it was nothing more than appearance, a base sensation way to say, "not like me," and move on. This was probably intentional. If the difference doesn't depend on something like intelligence, then the monster rats could be kept intelligent, making them more capable servants. Those who mutated them knew appearances would be enough, so they could leave them human in every other way for a greater efficiency slave. This is solidified in the climax, where human society is almost entirely destroyed in the exact way they feared. An ogre, a human who has managed to bypass the death of shame in a state of madness. Because of a pair of humans who escaped in the past, the monster rats gained a huge advantage. If that pair had a child, it could be raised without any human contact whatsoever. It could be a power user that didn't have a concept of humanity, bypassing the death of shame. So they kill the parents once the child is born and enact this plan, leading to a young girl who can walk right into the middle of town and kill the strongest humans with little fuss, while no one can even think of fighting her back, just scattering in the vain hope of survival. Before, any ogres were solo and mad, so the threat could eventually be poisoned, trapped, something like that. But this one has the backing of the monster rat's military might and strategy, something the humans have totally forgotten, allowing them to kidnap even more children to keep raising the threat. Against an army of ogres, humanity seems totally doomed. But technically they wouldn't really be ogres, because they wouldn't bypass the death of shame. They just wouldn't know humans as their own kind to trigger it. And that's where the humans find a potential solution. What if they created a mirror in front of the child? It's simple, but surely it would see itself as human and then recognize what it would done and die the death of shame, right? Of course, it's too simple for a climax. They do so, but all she does is scream and break the mirror, seemingly agitated but little more. How didn't it work if the death of shame is just appearance? The trick is that it isn't. It simply was for the humans because their definition was so slim. The definition of monster rats, what she sees as her own kind, has more to go on. She saw the humans not just look different, but act different, giving up so easily in the face of danger, unwilling to fight to save themselves, unwilling to do whatever it takes to win. Because the monster rats have all these traits, visuals alone weren't enough to convince her she was something else. She has to feel like she was something else, and they failed to do that. The way they do finally stop the seeming ogre is by rushing at her with the monster rat disguised and seeming to act with power as a human would, so that when she inevitably attacks and kills him, he can reveal his true form and trigger the death of shame. Not because she killed something that looked similar, but she killed something whose looks denotes a value she feels inside of herself, the value of everything she grew up loving and fighting for. You can't exactly have that on the human side if there's only one thing to love and fight for, which is why a simple image was able to trick them. Time and time again, their shallow definition, designed only to limit them to a specific result, raises nearly world-ending issues. But of course it did, because the term itself was a weapon, designed to cut out the uncontrollable by abusing the mismatch between our perceptions and reality, our limited time which forces rule of thumbs and assumptions. The term human here and elsewhere was simply playing to the inherent limitation of our species to engineer an easier time for those in control. The end circles back around to the beginning. Power emerged in cruelty, and it ends in cruelty. Squealer was the monster rat responsible for the rebellion, and having lost, he's put to trial. Well, he pleads his case, refusing their name for his own, and affirming that his people are human. He's laughed at and sentenced not to death, but to something worse. He's imprisoned while a group of power users simultaneously mutates his form into unimaginable pain and heals every single wound so that it can't kill him. For the rest of his existence, he will know nothing but total, complete, unyielding torture as a mass of flesh in a jar, displayed proudly in the museum for all to see. They have no shame for what they've done, because human no longer includes such a thing as shame. They cheer and celebrate when giving the sentence not because they love cruelty, but because to not have compassion, to care only what looks like you rather than what feels like you, is affirmed by putting who doesn't look like you in the lowest possible place. Those cheers are the glee of being, as they feel undeniably human. From the New World is chilling because it never shies away from this truth. The label is nothing more than a justification, and by incorporating our very sense of being into it, one will justify anything and everything. This video has gone on longer than I actually wanted it to, but I need to add a little bit more because there's something I've been wondering for a while, and I wonder if you can help me to understand it, this question here. What is my responsibility to a rat dying of poison in aisle 9 of the home improvement store? Not dead, but currently within the process of dying, just between a grill and some mulch, the scratching of tiny claws and twitching of a contorted, fuzzy belly. I was on my way to a block party where I'd become friends with the girl who rang up my groceries and get trapped by strangers into conversations about reality shows I didn't watch, quite literally dressed to impress with new white shoes to match. A new place with new people. I wanted to be best me, not just me. It was a bit much for the home improvement store, but we were only stopping in to get more roach traps given our landlord's inability to move the entire building's trash from right next to our kitchen window for 2 whole weeks, gifting us an infestation. With hardly enough time to make it to an event like this anyway, we didn't really want to spend hours rooting through every single cabinet full of, those plates you use and the other ones you don't, and a bunch of baking sheets that somehow don't stack, and 85 spice mixes that you just needed once hardly opened, and 13 leftover chopsticks somehow. How do you get an odd number of chopsticks? Anyway, you get the idea. It was a lot to clear out just to clear out pests. But luckily for us, death is pretty convenient. It comes in a package in aisle 10 with instructions to set and forget. Of course, that was unlucky for the rat, twitching on the ground in aisle 9. Everyone else had reacted with shock, but sidestepped around it in the corner, assuming its life was in past tense. Only I stared long enough to see the roll of its back into a compressed position, the rapid chittering of its whiskers. I don't know how long I was staring. It was probably only a few seconds, but the comprehension of death always feels longer. It's often so far away for the beginning of your life. It happens once every few years to someone you hardly knew. It happens after long battles, bringing connotations of peace, people say, and ease to suffering despite the sadness. They're in a better place. My uncle fought a long, painful battle. Unable to communicate with the world around him and contorted into painful gestures, horror in his eyes wider than ever before, his best friend of 40 years held his hand and met that painful gaze, saying one last goodbye. But he didn't speak it in words. There were none. It was in the pressure of his grip, the expression of his face, and the welling and wiping of tears. 40 years of memories were now his alone. Death was horrific, but it was an end to the similar horror of pain and struggle. It was the definitive boundary which allowed those memories to be important to begin with, which solidified him as the man he was, saying with certainty it was a life well lived. It was death as a part of life. The death in the aisle was different. It was peace becoming horror instead, a simple existence of eating, sleeping, mating, and a few other pleasures, shifting so quickly from, wow, what a fantastic treat, to total shutdown, unable to comprehend what or why, and left with no reason, only anonymous pain. It was disgusting, so disgusting that I was doubled over, clutching my stomach as well in the next aisle, wanting to vomit. Not because of death, but because of what I knew I should do in response to it. I wanted to kneel down beside it and explain, but where does one even begin? Do I explain what I knew, the exhaustion of the average worker which forces convenient poisons onto the market, the desire for uniformity and absolute cleanliness, the spread of disease hundreds of years before and its lasting impact on culture? Before I would even be able to decide which factor to explain, it would have already been dead. The factors of its death were too complicated for even me to understand, let alone a creature without the words to do so. I wanted to comfort it with touch, but would it even feel any more in this state? Would it even understand the gesture of a giant as gentle? There was only one thing which could help it for certain. To get back up from the floor in the next aisle, take my place above its feeble form, bring knee to chest to force heel to ground with a skull in between, breaking it and the ribs and every arm and every leg alike against the cold concrete floor, staining it with hot blood and stinking guts, but bringing an end to long, futile suffering. Those new white shoes were supposed to be red. Staring down at it as this raced through my mind, I could feel my leg and my mind fighting. One which had all the logic for why this should be done, that I should finish the job humanity started, and another which had all the weight to refuse. My legs started to feel lighter, and then suddenly, much heavier. A couple months back, I was sitting in my new boss's office for a review. The old one, genuinely the greatest supervisor I've ever had just left a few weeks before, not so much waving goodbye to the concrete slab stained with grease, the metal shavings infesting the cracks in the warehouse racks, but more walking away silently into the parking lot at 3:30 one last time without a word. He was corporate structured into purposeful obscurity, an untenable position for Gen X blue-collar pride. You know, the kind of guy where he can't help but get hands-on with everything and looks for any excuse to make something by hand. And that's what made him a good boss, though, that he was right there next to you, understanding the situation, teaching you how to use tools he'd mastered tens of years ago. Pretty much everything I know about physically making things, I know from him. He didn't give out work based on a spreadsheet. He gave it out based on the skills he saw someone exhibit firsthand. Sure, it's not as efficient on Excel for one guy to build up a conveyor and another to wire it, but it's what he knew would lead to the best result. So he was fine with me working a reduced schedule to deal with the issues at home because he knew it would be an inefficiency in name only. I worked hard enough to make up for it, measured not in hours across a week, but in quality at the end. I hate the work, but I took pride in him saying to me, "You're the only person who means a job is done when they say it," because it was a recognition of something true to me, not just a worker, but a person. The tools didn't make the job. The schedule didn't make the job. I did. The new one was nothing like that. I recently got a concussion at work, the kind where it felt like nothing at the time and you've hit your head much worse, so you just get back to it. It's the end of the day, it's right before the weekend, and then only to find out over the whole weekend that screens are making you immensely sick and you can't focus for some reason and you have to go to the ER and, oh God, your brain is literally bruised. So I didn't say anything until after the weekend when it became clear. I went in, reported it, they sent me to get checked out. The doctor confirms it's a concussion, but that I can still work on light duty. So I come back and tell him that, and in the middle of my sentence, he says, "Yeah, we have to drug test you," before walking away and closing the office door behind him. In fact, almost no one asked if I was okay. Every question was just about the timeline or the claim number, all of these things surrounding what I could or needed to do, but absolutely nothing about me. It was about a worker, not a person. It's a continuation of the behavior they showed when forcing me back to a full schedule. As I said, I used to work reduced hours because it let me manage a complicated home life. I'm not within the norm. My partner has a couple disabilities that don't make life impossible, but do make many things improbable, and so I needed more time than most to help out and just be around in case of an accident. And I've spoken about my father before. I'm more of a parent to him than the other way around some days, so I like to have time to go over there and make sure he's okay just the same. And since we're a one-income household, the money I make from all of this isn't something I can just give up on either. It's a part of keeping our lives stable. There's so much to do that if I'm on a full schedule, the phrase, "we don't even get to spend time together anymore," becomes a common statement. And I explained this to them, and you know what the response was? It's too hard to make a schedule. There are no exceptions. Except for your boss, who got to come in at 10 and leave at 3. And I asked to explain to the higher-ups, and you know what the response was? You can't. Never was it a conversation but a command, as they changed the schedule again and again, no matter how much people needed it, as they added more and more responsibilities instead of filling the positions for people they fired, as they standardized each workspace, cut off every conversation, every break, and so much more. Too much chatter, too much mess, too hard to make a schedule. Someone spending all day surrounded by gray walls, gray carpet, and a gray desk, intoxicated with uniformity and deciding everything should be the same. No exceptions. Except for the ones we like. After a bit of back and forth, a plea and a no, I left his office and went back to my desk. But having felt the weight of that situation changing and no one willing to even look at it, I couldn't work for long or well. I got up and made my way towards the back, quickening my pace to reach the bathroom before the welling tears would make themselves apparent, and with a pulled handle and a locked door, I'd thrown myself on those white tiles, jammed my head between my knees, and began to rock back and forth, hitting the barren drywall over and over, and repeating internally, "Make me so small I disappear. Make 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 me so small I disappear." I wonder what I'd have looked like if that came true. If you extended those tiles to the size of rooms, if you pushed that drywall out to the ends of a whole building, all you'd have would be me, doubled over and twitching, clawing at my own head. You'd have the rat. I don't know why I chose to say, "Make me so small I disappear." It's not something I'd ever said or even thought about before. But undertaking the flawed idea of analyzing myself after the fact, I think it was just to represent reality better, to call back to that memory and make myself like it because that's what it felt like. No one tried to explain to me why my life was being disrupted. All they did was say it must be so. And even if they did try to explain it, the words made no sense because their ideas are so flawed. No one comforted me. No one asked why it mattered. No one tried to do anything, not even to stamp me out. I think they wanted me gone, but there's a big difference between firing someone and making them quit, so I figured the suffering was part of the point. They looked down, noticed me, and walked onto the next aisle with a smirk. After all, we didn't kill it. The poison did. But to be fair, I didn't stomp on the rat either. I was just running over to where I was being called. And even if I wasn't, I don't think I could have done it. But I finally know why I felt that mismatch. I felt the responsibility to spread its brain across the floor because that would be embracing what human has come to mean, the cruelty of our ever-evolving term. These people, the heralds of robotics and automation, are intoxicated with what we can do. They see bridges and assembly lines with stars in their eyes because those things are the stars to them, humans reaching beyond the meager earth and onto something wider, greater. And yes, it is amazing what we can do, but they forget why we do it. We don't do it for humans, but for our results, for our schemes. Highways don't exist for your convenience. They exist in case of war, and they exist so a corporation can move goods, and they exist so black and brown communities could be fractured. Robots don't exist to make your life easier. If they did, then you'd be working less hours already. But productivity is increased by more than 2 times, while hours have remained the same time and time again because they exist to squeeze more out of you, to take away the low-value tasks so you can exhaust yourself endlessly on the high-value ones, so someone can make more money out of every hour of your life. Even if the what can be amazing, the why is fucking horrific. But we're so detached from the why that it doesn't even matter anymore. On that day where my shoes stayed white, I had to buy roach traps to deal with a landlord-made infestation. Really think about everything in this situation. I had to take scraps of paper with numbers written on them, which we promise each other are worth something because there might be gold in a vault somewhere, give them to a depressed teenager behind a counter, and with a machine that flips electrons to tally said scraps of paper in reference to an established market value of a good, which is transported here from a factory across the world where someone in some fucking lab coat figured out the best way to mix a few chemicals to make poison that would specifically kill the insides of a rat, and so on and so on. The rat lived life. No matter the conditions, unaware of any language by which to define itself, it performed simple tasks in simple ways to satisfy itself. It understood itself so well it never needed to ask. Humans, with all of that, I don't know in what way we live anymore or why we live anymore. Yes, it's a human way because we made it, but what did we make it and why? Can we define what it means to exist as a human when there are 821 layers of complexity between us and just buying the goods we need to survive? We're so detached from whatever it is at the root of us, that fundamental value that should unite us that Camus spoke of, that I don't think anyone can see or understand it anymore. A highway has no more reason to exist than the wildlife it displaces and kills. But because it's described in so many words, in jobs, and all of that, we forget that and assume the words equate to reason. We're so far beyond that we'll never recognize that universal value, but not so far beyond that we'll ever be happy in the mushy middle of an undefined human. The problem with that workplace, and many, is that people aren't treated as such. They're treated as numbers on a screen. We all know this. But the reason that it's possible is because we have no anchor to humanity anymore. We have nothing to share in anymore. And most people are kind. They don't treat someone else as a number on a screen because they hate them, because they want them to suffer, but because in this world a human can validly be defined as a number on a screen. My worries, even though they have deeply human roots, as all do, are only expressed and understood in words we made up rather than emotions we feel, in so much complexity that it feels more dignified but is really just vague terms on vague terms. Nothing of meaning in the relation to everyone at their core is missed. They don't see human validity underlying my conditions when they force standardization because too much is in the way. They enact cruelty because nothing human is being changed as far as they know. Rather, by chasing efficiency, they are affirming it. Look at the results of our spreadsheets. Human in its subjectivity allows them to justify any action as for humanity to refuse to see the root. And there is an active refusal. To some degree, we choose this arrangement. A well-known trait of humans is to ask why, so it's not a debate that such a thing defines us. What I'm getting at is that we have to choose to not ask why. We know it's all bullshit, we know it's all made up, but it feels better to keep putting up those layers because if you see a depressed teenager shoveling animal life into a dustpan, it makes human life all the more valuable. If you ship out 17 more robots, it makes human worth that many more goods produced in a year. It places us so far above and reinforces the trick. Why would we want to be closer to anything natural? Doesn't being better feel so good? Don't we deserve to fuck the entire world? I knew based on human logic that I should stomp the rat's dying brains to mush. But I felt based on that which we can never help that everything underlying said logic was deeply wrong. My responsibility to the rat dying in the home improvement store isn't to end its suffering or not. It's to prevent the suffering of all the other ones that come after it, to affirm the qualities it held by preserving how they exist in other life. The original question was coded by the inherent cruelty we've become accustomed to. That's what was wrong. That's what we need to change. We need a world where human doesn't exclude life and love and animals and kindness. We need to know what our lives are built upon. We need to know what we really are. We need to consider what human truly means and why.